Grammy Awards and their debut album selling over 12 million copies, Evanescence have stormed onto the worldwide music stage. This film exclusively reveals their roots and finds out how this award-winning band has soared to global success. Lead singer Amy Lee was born on the 13th of December 1981 in Riverside, California. At the age of 6, and shortly after the death of her younger sister Bonnie on St. Patrick's Day in 1988, her family moved to Little Rock, Arkansas. Despite the loss of her sister, Amy had a happy childhood, attending the Pulaski Academy in West Little Rock. She was very active artistically and was particularly keen on music.
Because she was somewhat introspective after losing her little sister, who was her little buddy, she became serious very quickly. My mother encouraged us to say, let's get Amy some piano lessons, let's do piano. And Amy actually even said to Sarah at one time, I'd really like to take piano lessons. I want to learn how to play the piano, after she heard Sarah playing it. So early on she had an interest in music. We've always played music to her. When all these kids, when they were little babies, we sung to them with the guitar, and music has been a part of this household.
Coming from a musical family has made Amy's influences varied.
When you talk to Amy, some of her favorite artists, she'll mention some of the more contemporary groups, Green Day and a few others, and I'm sure Kurt Cobain and people like that. But she'll also talk about Carole King or Marvin Gaye. And it's an interesting variety, and I think she's been influenced from a lot of different angles, and it makes her music a little bit more interesting.
At the age of 14, Amy had a chance meeting at a church camp with local guitarist Ben Moody. The entertainment editor of the Arkansas Times, Jim Harris, recalls the story of how the pair formed.
Evanescence started as a duo, actually, with Ben Moody and Amy Lee. They met at a summer camp. That they hit it off as good friends, and musically inclined as they both were, they really had a lot of mutual likes as far as the type of music they wanted to play.
Evanescence's first bass player, Nick Williams, remembers the story of how Ben Moody and Amy Lee met.
She was playing piano and singing a Meatloaf song, and Ben heard it and was impressed by it, and went over and just like, where'd you learn that? Like, who are you?
She sang wonderfully, as Ben recalls, and from that point on, I'm thinking they were only maybe 12 or 13 at this time. Actually, Ben is older, so maybe Ben was 13 or 14, Amy was younger.
But Ben was the strange-looking one at the church. He was the one with the spiky hair or the dog collar or something, And when you meet Ben for the first time as a dad, and he's a 14, you kind of go, okay. But I'm a pretty open-minded guy. I was in a rock and roll band.
Ben Moody is a genius in terms of programming, keyboards, guitar. He can do and play just about anything.
Ben would come over to the house, and they would sit right here. We had a piano over here. We didn't have this nice big piano from Baldwin. Thank you, Baldwin. So they mainly would spend time writing, and I knew that they were interested in doing things together as far as writing and creating, but they never played out. So I didn't know that they were actually becoming a group.
It's the definition of Evanescence is such a, a breezy, light, wispy kind of thing you can't put your finger on. Well, that's kind of what Evanescence is, and you really can't put your finger on everything.
Owner of Bigwig Records, Brad Cavanis, signed the band to his label at a young age and remembers what Ben Moody was like as a budding musician.
Ben Moody would watch episodes of VH1's Behind the Music like it was a lectureship series. You know, I mean, he was in training to be a rock star.
In fact, I used to come in and suggest, boy, it would be great if you guys would learn some cover tunes. And it's always a big joke around here that I would say, you guys are getting nowhere. The music's too long, it's too moody, it's not commercial. You need to learn some Eric Clapton, you need to learn some Leonard Skinner and some Bob Seger, and you need to get out there and play some weddings.
Little Rock, the town where Ben and Amy met, is the largest city in the state of Arkansas. It's the home to former President Bill Clinton and is in the heart of the Bible Belt in Middle America. Adam Peterson is the webmaster of LittleRockHardcore.com and explains what the town is like.
Compared to other metropolitan areas, it's pretty small. We only have probably about 500,000 people. And compared to other metropolitan areas, that's, you know, pretty small.
Little Rock's a really big, small town. We have almost everything. You know, we have an Arena 2 football team. We don't have an NFL team.
We only have a couple of 100,000 people in Little Rock proper. As far as the actual, if you were to add in all the suburbs around Little Rock, you're probably talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 people.
We're also famous for Bill Clinton.
Nearly 3/4 of all children brought up in Little Rock are taught to play a musical instrument, producing a number of high-standard musicians throughout the town.
Everyone I knew growing up had a piano in their house. And whether they took lessons or not, you could just sit around there, you could, you know, just kind of bang on it, you could pick out notes. A lot of kids around here, it's pretty typical that, you know, they get a guitar for their 12th birthday or something.
Talent really is strong here. We have a lot of musicians cram-packed into this area.
One of the reasons a lot of bands come out here is that the kids, they're not only inspired to make music, it's an availability. They get together, they play with their friends, it's a social thing. A lot of them have the space to rehearse, you know, in family garages or living rooms or however. There's a lot of availability around here.
In the early days, the band's songwriting ability and performance skills were primitive and a far cry from what you see today.
I mean, they weren't even called Evanescence the first time I saw them. It took me a couple of years to even remember that I saw this show. But their first performance that I saw was Amy sitting at a keyboard electronic piano and Ben Moody and Will Boyd sitting down at the bottom playing acoustic guitars. And they were all three just kind of staring at their instruments, and Amy was staring down and playing and singing, and I don't think I saw any of their faces for the whole half hour they were on stage.
And after the performance, you know, what do you say? It was horrible, okay? And I thought, well, that's the end of the band. So after they played, all the bands had little tables set up, and they've got CDs and T-shirts and stuff. Ben had made on the computer some little decals. I think he had 6 of them. That's what they had to offer. There was their whole offering, and I don't think so I bought them, because I felt sorry for them.
After a few years of development and playing at a number of Christian venues, Evanescence had their first paid performance at Vino's Brew Pub in downtown Little Rock.
For most of these kids, the end-all be-and-all was, you know, playing a headlining gig down at Vino's. You know, that was how they knew they had made it, when they could play, you know, get up there and attract a crowd of a bunch of their friends up there. And so most of them, they were just, you know, they were playing together, they were trying to write and play cool music and stuff that entertained them.
If you were an Evanescence style band coming up, you'd probably start out at Vino's Brew Pub. It's a pizza place, beer joint, and about a 200-seat venue. It stresses heavy rock.
Barry Ellis is the owner of Stonehenge Rehearsal Studios, where Evanescence practice. Barry has himself played at Vino's on countless occasions.
Vino's is a brew pub. They serve, pizza and good food, good beer. It's what they call a shotgun place, if you ever know what I'm talking about. It's just a big, long, straightway place. You can go all the way through the back. You can open up the back door and open the front door, and it's a shotgun building. We also have live acts, in the back. It's anywhere from local stuff to regional to national acts.
Vino's is probably where most people consider they played their first actual show. Ben and Amy did a lot of collaboration things together, but in terms of an actual paid admission type Evanescence show, it was here. We have an event called Fresh Blood. It's on any random Thursday every month, and we bring in bands that have never played the room, generally haven't played out much at all.
We've seen some pretty big names come off that stage, as well as some pretty crappy acts. But I mean, that's just part of the part of the game. You got to give everybody a shot.
The early shows were a little bit, maybe awkward for lack of a better word, because there was no full-time band other than Amy and Ben, and the use of electronics and things. So it was a little bit awkward, but it was pretty evident right off the bat that there was something there, because there's not very many female-fronted rock bands in a town like Little Rock.
The first real show that we saw that we were really proud of, it wasn't the one out in that field. That was the one where you just wanted to go home and hope this all ended soon. But the first real show we saw was at a little place called TNT off I-30 in Benton, Arkansas. It's part of a church. It was in a big youth group area. And I never forget when we were there that night, I was watching Amy and them and thinking, these guys are really good. But what turned me on is when I turned to look at the crowd, and I saw almost everybody in the crowd singing every word. Thinking, that's the song my daughter was singing around the house.
Ben and Amy realised early on that to create the type of music they wanted, they had to form an exclusive leadership partnership.
Ben and Amy formed that partnership between each other because they're that smart in the long run. I think they knew. I think those are two people that knew that if they stuck with their dream, they were going to make it big.
I'd say that Ben and Amy definitely had a connection or an understanding by the sheer fact that they were the two in charge.
It's hard to say really whether the friendship came out of the band or if the band came out of the friendship, because they very clearly, clicked there.
Yeah, the chemistry between Amy and Ben Moody was amazing. It looked like they were in love, that they'd actually been intimate, because they played off of each other so well, and that's really easy to spot in a band.
Ben and Amy were much like brother and sister in many ways. In high school they dated some, and so they were boyfriend and girlfriend too for a while, and then they wouldn't be for a while, and then but they were very much, the way I see that relationship was much like brothers and sisters.
They were very close. They'd, as most teenagers would, they'd insult each other constantly as a form of affection.
They didn't have a whole lot of people that thought like they did, so they kept it condensed. It's just going to be us. We're going to work on this project, and we play out. We'll hire people and show them the parts.
They would sit around either at Amy's house or at Ben's house, and they would play guitars and play piano with each other and write songs and ping-pong stuff back and forth in a little 4-track mini disc recorder.
The main reason they didn't have a real band is because they couldn't get anybody to think like them. It was their thing was totally different. A female voice, which was pretty angelic, and you got these heavy industrial guitar riffs. People are going, they can't wrap my mind around that.
I don't really know if their sound is totally unique, because I've heard of other bands before them that they seem to kind of model their sound after.
I always described the band, Amy was kind of the light, and Ben was the lens that brought everything into focus.
Evanescence was Ben and Amy. It wasn't like one of them could leave and they could replace the other and still call it Evanescence.
Very self-contained between the two of them for a very long time as far as all the writing and the arranging and the recording. And they would occasionally they would bring someone in to play drums, or they'd bring someone in to play bass.
In order to play live, Evanescence had to supplement the band with other players.
Or Amy would bring in some of her friends to sing backup. But generally, they were very, very self-contained in the beginning, and they would hire. I remember their first show as Evanescence. They had 7 or 8 people on stage.
Evanescence rarely performed live, but when they did, they used a revolving lineup of musicians from the local area. Nick Williams recalls playing bass for them.
Really, the band Evanescence at the time that I played with them was Ben and Amy. They had me on bass, Matt Al on drums, and Will Boyd on guitar. And what it was like is they had a demo they had already recorded. They had the music. I just took it home, learned my part, showed up, and played it.
But they never had enough money to hire somebody to play with them. So if every once in a while, which was only maybe once a year or twice a year over a 3-year period, if they wanted to play out at TNT or at Lamplighter or at finally Vino's, which was really a big venue, they had to pay people to play with them, but they never had 2 nickels to rub together. They didn't have any money.
I remember their first show as Evanescence. They had 7 or 8 people on stage, and it was all their friends, and they'd gotten them together pretty much just to play the show, and it was all material that Amy and Ben had written and recorded.
Well, when I first came into the band with Ben and Amy, it was their music. They already had a demo recorded, and so it was me on bass, Matt Alt on drums, and Will Boyd on guitar at the time. When you'd show up to practice, you'd already have taken the demo home, you've already learned it, you've played it. And so there's not really a whole lot of working things out. You play your part.
Dottie Oliver is the owner of the Little Rock Free Press and has noticed the frequency of lineup changes in the local music scene.
Actually, I've never been one to keep up with the lineup, the bands around here, because if you will notice by being around our city, one band member might play in 4 different bands, and he might play 3 different instruments in those 4 different bands. It's hard to keep up with them.
The music community, in order to kind of sustain itself and constantly perpetuate itself and grow, it has a lot of people who play a lot of different instruments.
You'll see that most guitar players do play drums and vice versa. A lot of drummers play bass guitar. They, for some reason, it's because it's part of the rhythm section.
Howdy is a friend of Evanescence's drummer, Rocky Gray, and recalls Ben and Amy hunting for musicians.
I remember back 6 years ago when they were looking, it was just, Ben and Amy. They were looking for musicians to play with around town. And I can agree with Amy that, it was just hard to find people because nobody was into what they were doing.
Juanita's is another venue in town where Evanescence played. Erin Hurley is the bookings manager and friend of Ben Moody. He remembers Ben telling him about the changing lineup of musicians.
I can remember Ben saying, at one time that if the band wasn't happy with whatever they were doing, they can leave. It was that apparent. And I guess that was the first time that I realized, okay, this is Evanescence, it's Ben, it's Amy, it's, these other cats are like hired guns.
One of those hired guns was Nick Williams.
I left primarily because of, I did have a need to express myself creatively and to be able to be a part of the writing process. And just having somebody else tell you what to do, at that point, they were a garage band. So when you're playing for somebody for free, being told what to do, and you see your opportunity somewhere else to go and do it your own, that's what I chose to do.
Through the grapevine, I heard that they couldn't find a drummer, they couldn't find other guitar players, bass players, other people to play, musicians around town, to play with them because, you know, nobody was into what they were doing.
With support from local record label owner Brad Cavanass, Evanescence decided to make Origin, a self-produced EP.
Brad helped them fund some of these early EPs because he wanted to sell some of them at their gigs. Brad's smart because he realized early on, these kids are pretty good. So I admire Brad for that.
I had honestly no idea what to expect when I heard it because I was thinking, as far as I knew at this time, Ben Moody was, you know, the vocalist for all I knew. So, but I walk in and they play it, and of course, big creepy organs and all this, and you know, these kind of swirling effects, and on top of all that, Amy Lee's incredible vocalist.
Those early recordings, what they called EPs or extended plays, Ben and Amy did in our home or in Ben's home. Ben's parents' house, in the garage, or Amy would stand in a closet and sing. And so they came up with these CDs, and they pretty much did everything on them. They would use whatever guitars they would find around here and use the piano, and Ben would create drum tracks on a drum machine and lay down bass tracks. It was all just the two of them.
You know, the first time I popped it in, I knew that was something different. You know, I was thinking, wow, that's really radio friendly. You know, I'm surprised this is, you know, kind of homegrown.
You'd go to an Evanescence concert and Brad would be out there selling them. And good for Brad, because he would give the kids in the band, Ben and Amy, a cut. They'd get a little cut of it. So they had their little EP thing going.
Kind of knew that they had the potential to go somewhere, and that they had an artistic vision that even if it never became popular, it was certainly worth hearing and worth championing.
Origin is now viewed as a collector's item, with examples swapping hands for hundreds of dollars.
Their early recordings are so valuable. They had an EP, a small record that they put out, and it's just, if I could find it in my stack of CDs around here, I'll bet it's around here. Maybe I could put mine on eBay.
It's one of those things that you just never expected to happen. When they were giving recordings away, it was literally just to push the band, get the name out there. I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams ever thought that something like this would happen.
If you want to, you know, exploit a band like that, you know, and, you know, make yourself look like a dick, man, then go ahead, you know, make some money.
So you see it for $300, $400, $700. I'm thinking, my God, I financed some of that album. I don't even have a copy of my own. I wished I would have, because I'd be selling on the internet. I'd be a rich guy.
Following on from the success of their first EP and their limited recording studio in Little Rock, the band headed east to Memphis.
The band's going to make it, I think it's pretty well known around here that you have to go somewhere else. I mean, that's always been the way it is. Maybe that's going to change. And because of Evanescence, maybe it will change.
The band went to Ardent Studios to master their latest demos, and by luck were introduced to music producer Pete Matthews, the man who would change their lives forever.
The first time I met Evanescence was here at Ardent. I was doing a record on a band called Dust for Life at the time. I think it was early 2000. And they came here to Ardent to master a self-produced demo that they had done themselves. And the mastering engineer at the time buzzed me in the studio. I was actually in this studio, and said there's this really interesting and different sounding band that just sort of walked in off the street, and you should come take a listen.
It was just after Origin came out, and they packed up and went to Memphis for several months, and they worked there with a heck of a guy named Pete Matthews.
It became a little bit tiresome going back and forth so much, so we decided that to get more consistent work done, that they should move up here. I found them a house and close to Ardent, and we set up a small control room in the back bedroom of the place. We would come here to record at Ardent, when we could, and when there was a little bit of money or a little bit of time open here. But most of it got done in that little house.
Memphis was a pretty good experience for them, I think, professionally, because I know they learned a lot from Pete Matthews, and certainly they credit him with a lot of their success.
I remember having a lot of people tell me that I was insane for moving this band up to Memphis and putting all this time and putting all my eggs into one basket, so to speak, and that sort of thing, because I really was, I had so much belief in them, and still do, obviously. They've fulfilled their potential.
If you went in the house, it was pretty much 2 rooms where one room was all recording studio gear where Ben worked, and then Amy would record in the next room where they had it all padded down with heavy blankets and things that you would use for packing furniture and things like that, and they made a vocal booth in there.
We would do things like put a guitar amp in the shower and put a mic 5 feet away from it to get a bizarre ambient intro, or it's amazing what you'll do or what you'll come up with in a situation like a home recording environment where you don't have the options that you do it at a place like this, where you have this fabulous console and this great big tracking room,
And they went to live in this place that was squalor in Memphis. It was horrible. We'd go to visit and take them food, and it was just bad.
My main memories are of just toiling, just working and working and working, getting things done, and it was a cool setup in the house because we had the little studio in the back room, and then we could take breaks and maybe watch a movie or something. Ben and Amy were both very into film even at that point. The creative collaboration between Ben and Amy, it went several ways. Sometimes, Ben would bring a riff to the table, or a loop, or a combination of many things, sometimes a finished song, and he would come to Amy for a melody line and some lyrics. Or sometimes it would go, opposite of that. Amy would write usually on a piano or on an acoustic guitar, and so they sort of came at each other in different ways,
Creative juices were flowing, but Amy's dad was starting to get tired with his dropout daughter.
When your child's in development, out of college, as a parent you're kind of going, yeah, okay, great, because you're really waiting for something to happen. Nothing's happening. In development, you're writing, you're depressed, you're the poor musician who has nothing, you're occasionally going to the beach to get your head together, you go to the movies a little bit. There's not much going on, and when people say, what's your daughter doing? Is she in college? I had kind of grown tired of Ben and the band and all that because I didn't think they were getting anywhere.
However, Amy and the rest of the band still had their hearts set on the big time. So producer Pete Matthews headed to LA to push the record.
Once we finished working on the demos and we felt like it was ready to be shopped, I believe I first went to LA. I didn't have a tremendous amount of luck in LA. I went to every label, my management set up. I got some great response, I got some lukewarm response. I didn't get any, I don't like that, but there wasn't anybody out there that was willing to just sort of jump on it and really commit. Everybody was a little bit disappointed at the time because there had been so many no's and so many, well, I kind of like it, but not right nows and all that sort of thing, so much rejection.
With no luck on the West Coast, Pete headed east.
And I had more luck in New York, definitely. I had a lot more positive reactions and a lot more interest, like people wanting to come see the band and that sort of thing. And but that's as far as it got. I got a couple people who wanted to come see them and that sort of thing, and that's pretty good. My last meeting of the whole week in New York was at Wind Up Records. And at the very end of the meeting, she said, well, is there anything else that you have that you want to play for me? And I said, well, you know, I have this band called Evanescence from Little Rock that I've been working on for quite a while. And I told her the whole story about moving them to Memphis and all that. And I said, you know, I've gotten some good response and I've gotten some lukewarm response, but nobody's really jumped. So let me know what you think. And I played her My Immortal. She got it. She immediately got it. She had, you know, her eyes were glistening just like mine at the performance that Amy gave on that take. I left and went and had dinner, and a couple hours later I got a call from the president of Wind Up, Diana's husband Alan, and he asked if the band might be able to fly up to New York that very next day. And I said, well, I'm sure they could. And I called up Ben and told him, hey, you want to come to New York tomorrow? The band came in and I met them at the airport, and Wind Up sent a limo for them, and it was sort of the classic record label big cigar guy kind of day, you know.
And when they came back from New York, they weren't so sure they liked it. They almost didn't sign with Wind Up. They kind of they were thinking that maybe they'd wait for a bigger label, you know, Virgin Records or Epic, or, you know, I mean, that Wind Up sounds real small. They only had the group Creed, which was pretty much a phenomenon at the time.
When Evanescence was signed, I was really surprised to hear about it. I could definitely see the potential in the band from seeing them early on. It was definitely different. It was unique because it was female fronted. The sound was a little bit different. Aren't a lot of people coming out of Little Rock, Arkansas sounding like Evanescence.
Wind Up decided that they wanted to move the band out to LA.
It wasn't terrible for us. It wasn't like, oh, she's gone. She's in a different state now, living in California.
They all, you know, started working out and writing, just basically writing more songs, you know.
I think sending them to LA was probably a tempering process, whether that's a record company type of deal or what have you.
They would send in songs and the label would go, those are great, send us 10 more, you know. And that went on for a year and a half, while at the same time they were trying out several different producers to do the record.
You know, LA, there's so much more going on than there is here, you know, and I guess if you want to be around what's music, then you know you're going to be in LA.
When I was 20 years old, 21, my wife Sarah and I moved to California to pursue a career as singers. My parents thought we were nuts. And you guys don't have a penny on you, and we're going off to California. So since I'd done it before, and I'd always talked to Amy about it and always played music, how could I say no?
So then finally they, after about, I guess, probably 15 months or so, they started making their record.
When they got out to California, it freed up their heads a lot, helped them to see more clearly. But they wrote a lot of those nice, good, depressing songs in Memphis.
Amy and Ben needed musicians to fill the band. They decided to call on three old friends: drummer Rocky Gray, guitarist John LeCompte, and bass player Will Boyd.
When Rocky and John came into the band, I think that the basic parameters of the music had been set. So, you know, Ben was sort of the main leading musical force in the band as it was in the beginning. And I think that probably in the beginning they sort of fell into line.
I was at a friend's house who who John called when I was over there and was telling him, this was when he just got the news that Ben wanted him and Rocky to play in the band. He was telling us like all the details or whatever, how much they're getting paid, you know, stuff like that. And you know, I think John's like the nicest person I've ever met, pretty much. You know, he's just the most, you know, grateful person there is.
You know, the day that John got signed on, you know, he came in here and said, I just, you know, worked my last, you know, hour of my job, you know, and said he just got signed on with, you know, Evanescence, and they were about to go on tour. He's tickled pink.
John was quite the publicist. He wanted to make sure I got the CDs, I knew who they were, and he also had another hidden agenda. He had a 17-year-old brother that really wanted to be a writer.
John's been very involved in the music scene as long as I've known him. He's always got 20, 25 projects going at a time. You know, very talented individual. You know, he can sing and plays guitar. I don't know if John plays drums or not. It wouldn't surprise me.
Zach and Bob, who work in Anthropop in Little Rock, played with Will Boyd in Lucky Father Brown.
In Lucky Father Brown, we were like serious about what we were doing as musicians, but we weren't. I mean, when you're talking about making it, being like making it in music, that's like here it's like getting on MTV or whatever, and that's never our aspiration. It's like we don't want to be an MTV band.
And
you
also,
have to sell out to do that.
Also, we weren't really trying to make it because we were an instrumental band playing weird instrumental music, so we weren't trying to make it. We were just trying to have a good time.
When he came and played with us, we'd switch around instruments and stuff, and so we got to hear him play bass and play guitar and hear different stuff because that's just what we did when we practiced. I mean, Will, he's a great bass player. He's probably a better bass player than he is a drummer, but he's a good drummer, I'd say that too. They came here and did a show on New Year's. It was prior to their CD release, and we were playing a bunch of shows, Lucky Father Brown, and Will decided that, or they asked him to play bass with them that night, and he had played bass with them before at a few shows, so he was friends with them for a long time.
There couldn't be a better guy to get the position to play drums for Evanescence than Rocky, you know.
One of the most talented individuals musically that I've ever met. Can pretty much pick up anything and play it.
Rocky played in Living Sacrifice, which was, you know, the biggest, probably, metal band to ever come out of Arkansas.
In the studio, Rocky, you know, he's doing the drum check, and the guy was in there telling him to hit the drums, you know, telling Rocky, you know, hit the drums, hit the drums.
It was kind of weird to see Rocky with long hair, you know, his tattoo showing and playing, you know, this, you know, death metal music, and then going straight to, you know, a radio rock band.
The guy said, man, get him to play a little bit of one of your songs for us. I said, hey, Rocky, play a little bit of the song. And I mean, man, he started in, and the equalizers and all that stuff just said, blew up.
With the full band in place, Wind Up sent Amy to performance school to fine-tune her stage presence.
Going to performance school for Amy especially has been a very important growing experience. I don't want to make it sound like that she was subpar or anything before that, you know, because she wasn't at all. She was great, but she's fabulous now.
I mean, you see her on stage now, and she's very confident. She's, you know, she's controlling the crowd. She's controlling the band. She's absolutely in charge.
She puts everything into her performances, so much so that I think it puts a tremendous strain on her voice.
They had gotten Amy to where she was a consummate stage professional. They had filled out the band to where there was an actual drummer and an actual bass player, to where they didn't as a band now.
It's very apparent that there's been a lot of coaching and input in terms of where the band's at.
It wind up put a lot of thought and preparation into the whole Evanescence push.
The first single to be released from the debut album, Fallen, was Bring Me to Life, which would also be the signature tune for the film Daredevil.
Well, what happened prior to Daredevil, and I would say if Daredevil was released in 2003, March, then in 2002, say around September or so, the radio station here picked up on Bring Me to Life and started playing it, and was getting a good response. Because it was my own daughter, I tried not to pay a whole lot of attention to it when it was on the radio. In fact, I'm the one in the family who has listened to the album the least, because I don't like to get burnt out on things. I want to still like it.
While they were making the record, Ben gave me a call, and I was in South Carolina at the time doing another record, and he gave me a call and asked me what I thought of them adding a rapper to the band. And I said, on one song or on the whole record? And he said, oh, probably just one song. I said, well, I think it would be interesting.
You just don't say, oh, we're going to put out our first record and we're going to sell 6 million units in 10 months and be the biggest rock act of the year. I mean, you can't plan those things. You could put a lot of money into marketing and try it, but 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen. So when it does happen, it's always a little bit of surprise.
But because I'm in radio, I have access to Billboard and Radio and Records Magazine and BDS and all these different indicators where I can go in on the computer and over the internet, I can find out what stations are playing and who's adding it. And I got to watch someone, honey, look at this. And I printed out, this thing's like coming out, this number 38. Look, it just debuted.
They went from, nobody knowing them, including, most of Little Rock not knowing them, just a few, 100 or so loyal fans here in this town knowing them, to being on the cover of magazines and featured in Newsweek.
The next week, wow, look at this, it's up to 28 and it's got a bullet. Wow, and I'm tracking this thing, and when it starts getting up into the top 10 slot, we're thinking, this is really happening. So it was very exciting, and then of course when it hit number 1.
Bring Me to Life, it's just one of those songs that sticks with you, and you can hear it over and over again. It doesn't get old.
It was used on television shows. It was used during like the Kentucky Derby. It was used when Stone Cold Steve Austin was coming out to fight The Rock on pay-per-view. They played Bring Me to Life. It's like, God, this song's everywhere. It was happening so rapidly and so fast, and they were selling so many hand over fist that they were up to multi-platinum before anybody knew it. It just like, so Wind Up finally flew us up for a party in Manhattan. And at that party, they had presented them with their gold record. They presented them with $1 million on there's some of these plaques back here, their first platinum record. They presented them with a multi-platinum record for $2 million. They presented them with and these are all supposed to be separate parties, so we got ripped off, I think.
Wind Up's investment in Amy certainly paid off.
I've seen several performances since the record has come out, and I've been impressed with every one of them. She really connects with the crowd, and that's something that's very hard for a young, at the time when we first started working together, she was, 17, 18 years old. It's very hard for any 17 or 18-year-old to really connect with an audience.
Their sudden rise to fame was certainly helped by having their debut single as the signature tune for the film Daredevil.
After a couple of years of being in development, they informed us that their song has been accepted in the movie Daredevil. Daredevil likes one of their songs. They're going to use it in Daredevil, Bring Me to Life.
I think it was a really smart move for the first single off the record to be on the movie soundtrack for Daredevil. I think it gave the band some immediate visibility and an impetus for a big video.
In the last 10 years, that is a part of marketing of a band these days, is to get a song on a popular movie. Now, Daredevil may not have been a very good movie, but it was big at the box office, which says something for America, doesn't it?
You've got a Ben Affleck-driven vehicle hitting all the theaters. You got the lead-off single that they're going to make a video for. It's a great song. It made a lot of sense that it did well.
But when the movie broke in March of 2003, we all went down to the theater, Ben's parents and us, and we were all invited, and it was a big radio station thing, and we were like mini celebrities, and we had great seats, and it was exciting. We had the popcorn, and there was a big cardboard cutout of Daredevil and Ben Affleck, and they gave it to me, and it's up in the attic right now. Big event, and we went to see the movie, and when Amy's voice came on with Bring Me to Life, and then of course My Immortal that Ben wrote was included in the film too. So Evanescence was the only group to have 2 songs in that film. We were very excited. It was a very exciting night. Probably at that point one of the best nights of our lives.
Although the band's national success was evident, there were still grumblings in the Little Rock music scene. This was not helped when Amy allegedly said that Little Rock was full of death heavy metal and Christian bands.
The first single and the success kind of took them to a national level. There was definitely a little bit of a backlash locally among musicians who felt like they hadn't paid their dues necessarily, or that they'd been in the right place at the right time.
I think Little Rock is so proud of Evanescence. I think you get a lot of grumblings from the musical community. Oh, you know, it's just pop. It's just, you know, why didn't they pick me? It's always, why did they pick me, you know? It's jealousy.
There was no doubt that Evanescence had gained mainstream appeal. However, questions were being asked of their Christian roots and whether they even saw themselves as a Christian band.
In the United States, there's a large market for contemporary Christian. There's probably 3 radio stations in this market that stress contemporary Christian music. However, there's also that fringe Christian rock that's a little heavier than contemporary Christian. That's where Evanescence actually started.
At first, I think the band Evanescence pushed themselves off as a Christian rock band. Like country music, it's a little bit easier to get into the Christian music charts than it is to get into the pop charts.
I don't necessarily believe they want to be classified as a Christian band or even a Christian rock band for sales. There is no, by classifying them in that small an area, they're not going to sell very many records.
If you have a specific group, regardless if it's a church group or a baking club or whatever, those members that are in that group are going to support it, whether they're 100% behind them or not. They're going to support it because it is what it is.
If you're in a Christian band that puts a big label on you from not only from what an audience expects, but from what's kind of expected from the band as well.
When they first played, they played in church. So they had to disguise their music a little bit by, I know I'm not saying that they purposely disguise it, but it did have to have a little bit of a spiritual connotation, or at least you had to be able to take it that way. Just like if you sing Bridge Over Troubled Water, well, that can be about Christ because he's a bridge. So I mean, as long as you could make some connection, you could sing it in church. So they sang for the youth group.
All the band members had a Christian upbringing, although some were less keen to push their faith.
I think Ben has more leanings maybe toward that way than the secular style. I believe that as a group, Amy was probably more secular oriented and didn't want to be lumped into the, they're a power Christian group or a heavy rock Christian group, and that might have had something to do with some of their disagreement.
The kids in Evanescence, as long as I've known them, they've always had a definite set of religious beliefs, but that's not what their music was about. Sometimes their beliefs came across in their music, but their beliefs weren't the point.
What happened with Wind Up is that they saw that, and there was a little fracas between the members, Ben Moody at the time and Amy Lee, that they not be classified as Christian heavy rock, that they be more secular, simply because I think that just expanded their sales and their market.
Pressures from their Christian foundations were not the only problem. A grueling tour and promoting schedule was also upon them.
Before the album came out, they were living in LA, sleeping in the morning. Life was pretty slow. But when this thing hits, bada bing, bada boom, you're on tour. Interviews in the morning, radio stations, television interviews, television shows, meet and greets with fans, sound checks, concert, meet and greet with fans after the concert. It's 2 in the morning, get on the bus, drive to a different town. At 6, get out of the bus, go in the hotel, sleep for another 4 hours, get a shower, go to the radio interview, boom. All of a sudden it's womp, 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 womp like this. Well, Amy handled it pretty well.
But other members of the band were feeling the pressure.
I was the assistant manager at Guitar Center in Little Rock, and Ben Moody came in to buy some equipment from me. And then I was telling a friend of mine later, that he came in. He's just like, are you sure? He's supposed to be on tour right now in Europe. I was just like, no, he came in. And so about 2 weeks later, when I talked to John, he had told me that, just one night, they had, were all hanging out talking, kind of like a little bit of a instance happened, and next thing I knew, he was on a plane.
As Ben Moody was a little moody, and he had a lot of up and down swings, and some days you got the good Ben, and some days it was a little difficult, and so you had to handle it with kid gloves.
I know that Ben had split once before. I knew that Amy had left for about a week. I knew that Amy had a lot of moments during their tour where she couldn't sing for a week or so. I knew there was something possibly going on, and I thought it may be just a sudden rise of fame.
On the road and touring, Ben was unhappy. When you're touring, you're not creating. You're singing the same songs over and over again. You're almost like a trained monkey. Okay, here, put that in your mouth. Time to do the trick. Play that bring me to life thing.
I've heard stories, about how, they would fight a lot, but they were always, best friends.
There was some little scene, and they had a little tension, and when the tension occurred, Ben said, I'm going home.
Yeah, and that's just what seems so shocking, is because when they did break up, it was, a war of words, and it still is.
And I think this particular time, he thought that they would just fold up their tents, bring the circus home, miss a few dates, we'll go make them up later, you know how these bands do. But this time I think Amy had thought, that's about enough of this stuff. And we're going to go on without Ben.
Reactions to Ben leaving the band were mixed.
I wasn't really shocked when I heard that Ben had left the band. I was a little surprised that he left at such a high point.
I was actually quite surprised and shocked that Ben was leaving the band, just because that we all strive to get to what he's attained in life. And it's not, I'm not bashing Ben at all whatsoever when I say that, because it may have been artistic differences that separated them.
Ben leaving the band, I was kind of shocked, man, because, that's something that you live for, That's the whole reason of being in music, is to be a rock star, and, be on stage and play in front of millions of people.
That just kind of sounded like a bullshit move to me when they were on top, and
yeah, he kind of
just to kind of ditch his bandmates like that.
Well, and I would have gave my left nut just to be in his shoes, man, and I wouldn't have quit. I don't care how bad could it be?
Knowing Ben, I'm sure he had a really good reason to do what he did, and I'm sure it wasn't as abrupt and uncaring a break as maybe what was publicized,
There's a lot of these breakups that go on in bands right in the beginning, because some people just go, hey, I didn't sign up for this.
The duo that had formed the band had split. It was time for Amy to take centre stage.
She had pulled that band together, and she made it work without Ben, and she was so proud of herself, a 21-year-old girl. That's, I've done this, I made this happen, and I pulled it off. that she had ordered catering for the band, and they ordered Dom Perignon for the band, and they were celebrating because they did it, and she proved that she could do it. And so when that occurred, I think pretty much then that they felt like, you know, if Ben wants to leave, we can let him leave. We can still go on.
People were scared when they heard that Ben Moody was leaving, because he was known as the person that wrote all the music and got things going. But, you know, from knowing the guys that are in the band also, talking about Rocky Gray, John LeCompte, they got the guitar player from Cold. Like, those are all three great, you know, musicians. You know, like the songs I've heard them working on already are every bit as good, if not better, than what Ben was doing, so I don't think they're going to have any problem.
Evanescence had been touring with the band Cold, and they approached lead guitarist Terry Balsam to fill the space left by Ben's dramatic departure.
Terry is from Jacksonville, Florida, and because I'm from Florida, I liked him immediately. And he's just a real low-keyed, even-keeled guy with a lot of creative ideas, and he's a fine guitarist. He's a tremendous guitarist.
Ben's departure, I think, really the other guys in the band will become more important. John has written 2 or 3 songs for the band, one of which is on the record. Rocky's written songs that are on the record. Will wrote one of the first songs that they performed and recorded.
Amy and Terry get along real well. There's something that really connects there. And I was afraid after Ben left she wouldn't connect with someone. But they got a nice thing going there creatively that I can see that is going to be very interesting to watch.
Although Ben may have left the band, his future looks bright, as the demand for a talented songwriter is always high.
I've seen Ben a couple of times since he left, seen him in here, you know, just hanging out and watching other bands. He seems to be doing real well with the kind of collaborative songwriting stuff he's doing. I know he worked with Avril Lavigne. He had some stuff on the Punisher soundtrack.
Ben's future seems quite good. I mean, you know, he's worked with Kelly Clarkson, Avril Lavigne. He's doing the Resident Evil 2 soundtrack.
I think because Ben Moody is a songwriter, that he'll do so much better than she will. Songwriters make a whole lot more money with a big hit than a rock star, you know. Rock star is more glitter and flash.
As long as he, you know, keeps a cool formula and everything, I think that, you know, he'll be pretty successful, you know, because Ben and David, you know, they're the hot topic in L.A.
When we first started working together, he told me that his aspiration, his main aspiration, was to become a film director, and that he had seen many musicians sort of make the transition. They make it in music, and then because they have a name for themselves and sort of a presence in the community, they then start a film production company and they get into film that way, and it's a bridge sort of.
When you have Mel Gibson call you up on the phone and ask you to write the score for his movie, you know, that pretty much tells you right there, you know, your writing capabilities.
He's even got his new band, you know, coming out on Wind Up Records, you know. So I mean, it seems like he's doing what he wants to do, you know. He says he's making a, you know, a horror flick, and I think he used Evanescence as pretty much a pedestal to do what he really wanted to do. You know, he got in it, you know, got out quick, got what he wanted from it, and now he's, you know, utilizing that.
In November 2003, Evanescence picked up 2 Grammys, one for Best New Artist and one for Best Hard Rock Single.
I was not surprised that they won the Grammy for Best New Artist. Their biggest competition was 50 Cent. I think in terms of the Grammy and the members of that Academy voting, I just think they were going to win out.
I already knew they were going to win. I just felt it in my bones, you know. They were in the most popular movie of the year.
After the Grammy show, Rocky came into the store. I got him to sign a few symbols and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, Mr. Grammy Man, Mr. 2 Grammys," you know. "Oh, it's just a thing here." And he's like, "Yeah, man, you know, It's, you know, he's so laid back, Rocky's so laid back, you know, it just really didn't, you know, faze him, but I'm sure that, hell, I'd have been running naked all over my house, you know, going, woo, 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 I got a Grammy, you know.
I think the week or two before that, they'd won the Billboard Awards as Best New Artist, too. So you got a kind of an idea that the buzz about them in Hollywood and in New York, too, was that they were going to get that award. I thought they had a shot at winning, you know, Best Song. And I guess they did win Best Hard Rock Song.
I thought they made an incredible record. I thought they made a valid record. I think they've made a record that will linger. You know, stylistically, I think it'll influence a whole new generation of musicians.
To me, I felt like they deserved it. You know, I felt like as far as, you know, they've came in just a short amount of time, you know, it's well deserved.
Fame has not gone to Amy's head, as her father recalls in a recent telephone call from Rome.
We probably talk about once a week now. The other night she called from Rome. She was sitting at a table overlooking the Vatican. And she called because she was eating a romantic dinner and she wanted to include Sarah, her mother, in on it because it was so great. She knew her mom would love it. So she called on her cell phone and said, "Mom, I'm in Rome. I'm overlooking the Vatican. I'm going to the Sistine Chapel." She had just been to Notre Dame, wanted to share these things with Mom. So we stay in good contact. She's a good daughter.
With the band having already sold over 12 million records and gaining countless awards and accolades, the loss of Ben Moody might seem fatal. But with the exciting and talented new lineup and Amy's unique star quality, Evanescence can only go from strength to strength.
You know, they blew up really quick. I mean, I think everyone was kind of shocked at how, you know, they were in the top 10, you know, music charts for, you know, over a year.
The band is the happiest it's ever been. Ben is making movies. He's moved to California to pull that off.
I think the future for Evanescence is going to hold an enormous amount of pressure to deliver. I mean, there's always that enormous amount of pressure to deliver the sophomore record. In this case, you got to deliver it without your right-hand man.
Now that Ben Moody's left, you know, their main songwriter, you know, who really knows if they're going to, you know, be as successful on their next CD as they are now.
When you're signed on to a major label, they want to see you at least cut 3 major CDs, 3 blockbusters, 3 platinum-selling albums.
Hell, they could put out their next album, man, with Rocky, you know, farting on the snare, you know, and probably sell about 4 million records, you know, just him doing that.
If it sounds like somebody scratching their hand on a blackboard for 60 minutes, I think it's going to sell.
I'm anxious to see where Amy Lee's career goes at this point. You know, it's one thing to be a songwriter, but it's another to be a front man.
I have a lot of confidence that Amy will come up with another fantastic record.
They started as a group, they made a name for themselves as a group, and now they're doing their things. And Evanescence is going very strong.
I can't envision anything other than just great success for them.
From knowing the guys that are in the band also, talking about Rocky Gray, John LeCompte, they got the guitar player from Cold. Like, those are all 3 great, you know, musicians.
Amy is not going to whore out her art. She's going to create beautiful art that she's happy with it. If nobody buys a one of them, it gets back to that thing that she said when she was sitting right here in this room and said, "Dad, it's art. I don't care if anybody ever buys it." That attitude is making them successful.
And who knows, you know, maybe there'll be a collaboration between Ben and Amy in the future sometime. You know, I wouldn't close the door on that.